Martin Luther King Jr. once mentioned, "We are not makers of history. We are made by history." In today's Sensei episode, we will explore writing and a little bit about history. Learn from a writer who became a museum curator. Let's improve our knowledge as we listen to the story of our featured Sensei. Join us as we explore, learn, and improve. Hi, I am Bianca, and this is Sensei, their skills and talents. Hi sir, good morning po.
Good morning and welcome to the Center for Kapampangan Studies.
I am Bianca from Limang Siglo.
I'm Alex Castro. It's short for Alexander Maynardo del Rosario Castro. I currently work as a consultant for Holy Angel University, and concurrently I am the museum curator, so in charge of all the little museums here, from the Manansala Gallery to the Center for Kapampangan Studies Archival Museum. And before that, I was in advertising for a period of about 35 years. My last post was with Publicis Jimenez Basic, where I was a senior creative officer. And previous to that, I worked for 4 years in Bangkok, Thailand, as executive creative director of Synergy Tokyo BNB, and before that as creative director of Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising. So what does that mean? I actually wrote commercials because I started as a copywriter. I have always been working in the creative field. Even if I were in advertising, I would foray into showbiz comedy writing. I used to write for comedians like Tessie Tomas, Gary Lising, and I do their dinner theater show. So I've always been a writer. So if they ask me, I'm just a writer.
You mentioned about being a museum curator po. Can I ask, what do you do when you say it's a museum curator po?
Well, I am not professionally trained as a curator. Mostly, I did this, it's a play it by ear. And because I love museums, I would often visit museums in Makati, and when I'm away, I would make it a point to visit museums abroad. And I would be, very observant on how things are displayed, on how things are presented, and how the narratives are related. So I had a natural feel for it. So when I went to Holy Angel, this is my retirement job. I actually set up the museum of the Center for Kapampangan Studies, the archival museum upstairs, and had a hand in designing the gallery of Manansala in the Museum of Kapampangan Arts. Well, I think you must have just the natural ability to, organize things, because sometimes you are bombarded with so many stuff.
Yes.
So my training in advertising, which is basically to sell a story in 30 seconds, that proved to be very valuable to me, because it taught me how to edit, it taught me how to organize, it taught me how to prioritize, let's say, one object over another in the course of mounting an exhibit. It also helped that when I was abroad, I started collecting Filipiniana stuff, and then when I came home, I started collecting Pampanga stuff. So that also prepared me, it's like an informal education on how things, on the visual documentation, the visual history of things, you have a better appreciation for it.
Here in CKS po, what we can see?
Well, for example, here, the following are some of the museums, small museums that you will see. The Museum of Archival Collection, which is upstairs. These are paper stuff, mostly a display of ephemera, because paper does not last long. So upstairs you will see a collection of books, old passion, pictures, anything and everything on paper with intrinsic historical value. But it's different with the Manansala Museum because that is an art collection. So we were happy to be the repository of many of the national artist's sketches and drawings in charcoal and pencil a few years ago. So we had to organize them differently. My intent was to show the progression of the style of this national artist from Macabebe. So we started with, let's say, when he started, he was a realist painter. So which meant he was a conservative painter. He used to paint mga bahay kubo or draw kalabaw, the usual rustic landscapes. And then you can see after he went to Europe, to France for his scholarship, his drawings and art style was gravitating towards or metamorphosing into modern cubist style. So that was how I presented it. And then it culminates, if you look at the exhibit, it culminates into, a recreation of his studio, because we also inherited some of the studio, including his chairs, his paints, his brushes, his National Artist Medal, and some paraphernalia from his home. So, again, as a curator, you need to look for a particular point of view on how to tell a story. So, since nobody knows the timeline of Manansala, because very few know that he is from Macabebe, so I opted to go with that storyline.
How you research about those stories po?
I am what you may call I'm not a historian. That's why I sometimes cringe when people introduce me as a historian. Ako magagalit yung mga tunay na historians yan. I have a course in chemistry and communication arts. That's my background. It's a natural curiosity for things. I think that's the best trait of a historian, to be curious about things, to find out about their backstories. And these things are not necessarily the mainstream history type, like, where did the first mass in the Philippines, where was it held, Not of that sort. More on pop culture.
For more Sensei and Limang Siglo videos, you can visit our social media accounts. Please do like, share, and subscribe. For example po, if there's someone or I want to be someone like you, is there any tips that you would recommend for me to try to check some histories, or how do I gather information about our history?
Well, every day history happens. Before you know it, 10 years have elapsed. When I was younger, I used to have a notebook because at that time I am from Mabalacat,
Yes,
this sleepy town that was considered parang a third-rate town. So when it was just a sleepy town, if there are significant events that happen, I would read them. I would actually cut that paper or write it down, jot it down. And after like 10, 15 years, I had a whole notebook about, oh my God, I have a whole notebook of notes about my town. And out of those resources, I actually published my book of the history of Mabalacat. It started with that. It started with the natural curiosity for things, and then you start stashing away these little snippets of information, and before you know it, you piece together this whole quilt of history based on those little stories.
So basically, it's more of curiosity.
Yes.
So it's grows. The idea will grow if there's a curiosity.
Yes, and don't forget to put it on paper.
Exactly. Since you mentioned about papers, I'll go with the writing. You also became a writer, scriptwriter, and a blogger. I also check about your blog.
Ooh.
Yes. And I found a lot of catchy titles. How do you compose or conceptualize your titles po?
It was part of my training as a copywriter. I wrote headlines that are catchy. I think some of the slogans that I had a part in included were, slogans like labadami labango. So, this play of words.
Yes.
I think it's a flair that is very hard to teach. But once you get around to doing that every day of your life for 35 years, it will come naturally. It's creativity. It's either you're born with it or not. Ganun lang.
With for example, the title of your blog, View of Pampang, right?
Yes.
And A Fly and a Flea.
Oh, okay.
I also checked those. And
Manila Carnival.
Manila Carnival.
Mekenilan.
Mekenilan, yes. So,
Historian.
mostly they are themed from Kapampangan culture, right?
Yes. That was because when I was still in the advertising industry, I saw this article on newspaper that says, First International Kapampangan Studies Conference. So I was like, what? There is an International Kapampangan Studies Conference. So I took a leave for 3 days from my office and went to Holy Angel, where the host university, and I signed up for the international conference, and I was amazed that, people from Spain, from Germany, from Europe, all over Europe, from Mexico, they had Kapampangan resources in their library, and I was hooked. In the short 3 days that I was here, it was a rediscovery of my province. I have been away for so long from Pampanga, because straight from college in Baguio, I went na to Manila. So I thought it was time to give back to the province that nurtured my skills, or, this is where I grew up, even if there was some sort of a love-hate relationship sometimes. So that started why I gravitated towards Kapampangan themes.
Do you have any methods of writing, how you write or compose those writings, works?
Oh, yeah. Well, as you can see from my blog, I rarely put references. Sometimes I am bashed for it, but I said, these are articles. It's almost like a magazine article that don't require footnotes and citations. But, after a while, I just had to. For example, in the case of Manila Carnivals. I think one critic, when he reviewed my book, Sid Reyes, the art critic, he was one of my book reviewer. He described my book as, an easy breezy writing style that so easily engages you. Sabi ko, oh, I didn't thought of that. Sometimes kasi, I can't even write. When I look at my earlier writings, I am supposed to be doing a historical feature. Then all of a sudden, I would interfere. My personal background would sometimes creep its way into the article, like, when I'm discussing homes, for example. When I'm discussing ancestral homes, I would talk about the style that this house is postmodern. It was like a post-war 1950s style. And then I would incorporate, much like our house, which used to have a crazy cut, cemented facade that, usually integrated 7-Up bottles, as crushed 7-Up bottles as decoration that were so famous in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I guess that way the reader can visualize what I'm talking about, because yung mga references to those newer things melded with, old style architecture. There's a sense of familiarity to what I write about.
Yeah, like what I've said, I also read your articles, and somehow those are the things that we miss since they're almost gone in our generation. So as a millennial, can you give us some encouraging message on how you're able to look more of those histories to write more and look more inspiration and write more?
Well, I think that's a problem. In fact, I also have to encourage them how to read. You know, I have often noticed sometimes, when my blogs, they make lots of, I get this nasty comment sometimes. Like, I featured this story about this priest who was murdered in Mabalacat, and, it's another Padre Damaso story, blah, 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 how dare you, blah, 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 you always put the Spanish friars in a bad light. I said, have you read the whole article? It was supposed to set the record straight what happened to him, that he was not killed because he did some lewd, lascivious act against a woman. It's because he was killed at the heat of the passion of the revolution, because he was a Spaniard, and to revolutionists, he symbolized the enemy. You only realize the value of things when you start losing them, right?
Yes.
I used to pass by this street every day in Mabalacat, and I would see this old house that it's so run down and so dirty and so decrepit. After a few months, when I started walking again on that same street, I found it gone. It's like, well, what happened to the house? I took it for granted when it was there, and then when it was gone, I started looking for it. So for millennials like you, I don't intend to sound preachy, but you have to recognize the value of all things now, because you will only, realize that they are valuable when they're gone. And, consigned to just somebody's memory. And that is very sad, diba? You cannot concretize it.
For more Sensei and Limang Siglo videos, you can visit our social media accounts. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Do you still write blogs on the internet po? Recently?
I do. I always, the ones that are active now, because I'm done with Manila Carnivals, I'm done with, if you go to Kapampangan Listorian, this is the blog of Center for Kapampangan Studies. The concept is, it's a blog of list. Okay, so I manage that. That is pop culture, Kapampangan pop culture at its best, because it just makes a list of things you didn't know, like, for example, 10 legends about Arayat, 12 Kapampangan beauties who competed at Miss Universe, things like that. It's easy reading. And I created last May 2020 Museo Mabalacat. It's a virtual online museum of Mabalacat. It's just a social media platform. This old municipio, which is being restored, will be the site of the new Mabalacat Museum. So, since the museum, the physical building is not complete, I have so many materials about Mabalacat, so I decided to put it online. I created it on my own, and now it has close to 4,000 followers. And then I get emails from students, and you'd be amazed at how much number of people are interested in local history. When I post a picture of a landmark, a vanishing landmark in Mabalacat, they would react. Like, oh, I used to see this. Where is it now? It has vanished.
Yes.
And then, oh, sayang naman. How unfortunate. Or I would write the love story of this couple in Mabalacat who were known as the Romeo and Juliet of Mabalacat. And they would say, oh yes, I remember the story of these two star-crossed lovers. Because even upon their death, they were together, with their tombstone, Romeo and Juliet of Mabalacat, somewhere in California. These little histories are stories, they're not just stories, but part of the small town history of Mabalacat then. Well, now, it's a bustling city.
Sir, I'll just go back with that
Yes.
Kapampangan historian. Do you have steps on how you gather those lists?
Of course, you start with what I had, with what materials we have. I'm sure you've heard of Sensei, our,
Yes, bro.
for example, that's a rich mining ground for anything and everything Pampanga. So if you just break the articles into lists, for example, you take a look at the towns and their patron saints, and then there you have a list. The 23 or 21 patron saints of Kapampangan towns. So there goes. You already have a list.
Are you the only one who came up with the idea?
Well, I made sure that it is a tenable idea that, it can go forever. Usually, projects like this are a result of our planning meeting. Like, we need to be more present online, as opposed to print materials that disappear after some time. Like yung mga sing-sing namin, these are very popular publications out of print. But online, it stays there for a while. So, it's a joint project. And then because I get content contribution from fellow Kapampangan advocates, like Francis, his field is culinary, church.
Yes.
So, can you generate a list of so-and-so?
And talking about online, of course, we are also born with the books. I heard you're also a co-writer of Filipino. What did you do?
Oh, yes. How did this start? Actually, the founder of Filipino is this bright young nurse. He used to be a nurse from Bulacan. His name is Luis Batumbacal. I think he was checking on my blogs, and he invited me to write for Filipino. So it was a fresh change because I also had a lot of materials about Filipinas in general, So, would you like to pitch ideas, Sanya, for Filipino? Because that was his website before. It's a widely referenced website. Of course, I jumped at the invitation. So, I started throwing ideas. I think the first one that I pitched was 10 most sensational crimes in the Philippines in the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
So, oh yes, yeah. He would usually approve. Oh, this is fascinating stuff. He was also into pop culture, not the mainstream history style. So he invited me to write for his book, like what every Pinoy should know, or something like that. I even don't know the title. And he said, "Tell you what, I will credit you as my co-writer," and that's how it came to be. I think the most popular one that I wrote for was the first Igorota beauty queen, who was Miss Benguet of 1915. Chinus Giray, that's her name.
Well, basically, it's a Filipino trivia.
It's a Philippine, yes. Nothing heavy or nothing, it's just, but it's the same aha moment when you read it, diba?
And that ends our Sensei episode featuring Mr. Alex Castro, a writer and a museum curator. This Sensei episode helped me to realize how important our past is. Our history. It may be chaotic, yet it molded us as a Filipino. Our ancestors made great stories and memories. Truly, that history made us. Thank you for joining us in this episode. See you again next week. I am Bianca, and this is Sensei, their skills and talents.
For millennials, if you have something to say, or if you have a story to tell it. But just don't tell it like it is. Tell it in the most engaging way possible, so you will elicit the reaction that you want. Because, you have the technology at your disposal. In our time, we only had one typewriter and, we have slide presentations. Now you can make pictures leap from a page when you're telling a story. So, make your story count for others to read and get reactions to. So, it will also generate stories from them. And isn't that beautiful? Parang we're connected. The world is connected through our own common stories and common experiences.